Hello, this is Stories About Speaking. My name is Joanne. Good morning. I'm recording this in the morning. This is about a man on fire, and I'm not 100% sure why this story bothers me so much, besides the fact that it's horrendous and tragic and those type of things. I mean, we hear lots of stories all the time that are horrendous and tragic, but for some reason, this one stands out to me. So, man on fire. When I was living in Madrid, I saw this on the television, on the news, uh, a man that was on fire. And I didn't really understand enough Spanish to know whether this was something that had recently happened or that was an anniversary or why he was on fire. It certainly looked like a real situation that he was definitely on fire. And because I'm English and in the UK, certainly on the BBC, they don't show things like that. So it was a real shock for me to see something so graphic as this man, um, with all the flames and everything around it. But I didn't understand the news well enough to know what had happened to him. So I went and investigated on Google and found out a bit more. And that in itself is quite unusual because normally, you see things on the news and you kind of trip past it a little bit and life goes on. But I went and Googled it, and it turns out I think it was Valencia. I think he was in a town square that he'd set himself on fire. I think it may have been in front of some sort of a local government building or something like that. And he was a Romanian chap that had come to Spain with his family and under false pretenses. He thought he was coming for a particular job. He'd been lied to about the different situations that he would find when he got to Spain. And then he was really searching for help. And he was going to the local authority buildings and I don't know what it's called in Spain, sort of social services, and I think he was going to churches. He was really asking everybody for help and saying, I just need to get my family back to Romania. It was pretty shocking. And you could see that, I mean, I don't know how clearly he expressed himself because obviously he's Romanian, but I know enough about the Romanian language and the Spanish language that you can make yourself understood because I've been to Romania and I only had a bit of Spanish. It's one of these Latin languages that you can make yourself understood. So I'm pretty sure made himself understood. What I'm guessing is that nobody knew what to do with him. And I suppose it wasn't really their jobs to help. I think what had happened is every time he asked somebody for help, they would send him to another department or another organisation, which is something we've probably all experienced. But anyway, he ended up setting himself on fire, and people didn't really comment on that. I think this is the bit that was so fascinating. It was almost like this is a crazy guy and he set himself on fire. And I'm thinking, this is a guy out of his mind, frustrated, feeling that he's not being listened to. Um, and and I had such sympathy or empathy for him that he just couldn't get through to people that he needed help. And anyway, it turns out when I checked on the story, he did actually die from the burns. They were pretty extensive. Excuse me, I'm not even sure whether he'd use something like petrol. I suppose you do if you're going to set yourself on fire. I know this is a bit of a horrible subject. As I say, you might be thinking, of course, that's a shocking thing to see, and of course you're going to remember that. But I don't remember all the wars that I've seen and all the other nasty things that I've seen on the news. But for some reason, this one and the story that goes with it. And later on, they interviewed, I think, one of the daughters, and she was saying, I think they were selling things on a beach or trying to make some money, and they were saying that's illegal and you're not allowed to do that. And they were just trying to find. Their story was that they were trying to find the funds to get back to Romania and that they'd been lied to. I think there was a lot of cynicism about, is that really what they're doing, or is it just that they're there illegally at the time? But again, a complete lack of compassion for somebody who was going from department to department asking for help. Anyway, one of the last points about the story is the daughter was saying, "I'm not a prostitute." And I thought, oh my goodness me, your father has just died in a horrendous way, and you feel the need to defend yourself and say anything at all about this type of thing. And I couldn't believe that it had been published too. I just thought that that was a complete lack of understanding about the situation and a desire to sort of put these people in that kind of position. And I know when I was living in Spain, everybody used to say to me, "Oh, you're not an immigrant." And they didn't like that word. They like to say that you're an expat. And the word immigrant has got such negative connotations. But obviously, when you see things in the news and it's such a shocking thing, and you say, "Oh, they're not like us." These kind of people, maybe they do that anyway. Maybe they do that normally. And these kind of people bring these kind of jobs and bad feelings here. And I know whenever I used to say to somebody, and I used to use the word immigrant, obviously you can be a legal immigrant or an illegal immigrant. And I think people kind of use the word immigrant and see it as being something negative. But I remember lots of times people saying, "Oh, you're not an immigrant," to me when I lived overseas. "You're an expat," which I think what they were trying to do is separate that feeling of negativity and otherness. And then the expat is, "Oh, you're welcome here and you're working and you're doing all these things." And they used to say to me, "Well, some of these immigrants are economic migrants. They're coming here for work and for the money." And I thought, well, I've come to Spain for the work and for the money. I mean, I was going to do work that I was going to be paid for. And they'd say, "Oh, no, 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 not you. These immigrants take the social security and use the medical and the doctors and different things like that." And I said, "Well, I use the doctors and the different facilities that are here in Spain. If I'm legally entitled to it and I'm living and I'm working here, then I use those." And they say, "Oh, no, no, no. Immigrants are people that abuse the social services and that they have like unemployment benefit." And I was like, "Well, I had unemployment benefit. I lost my job in Spain and I was entitled to claim unemployment benefit. And in Spain, you're allowed to have how much you're allowed to claim is based on how long you've been working there, up to a maximum of 2 years. So I was legally allowed to have unemployment benefit." And people don't know how to respond to that. That was, they're trying to make out as in, "Oh, well, you're the good kind of immigrant, and then these are the bad kind of immigrants." It's quite shocking to think that really that we can dehumanize people and and have no effort to understand how difficult something might be for them. I mean, it's hard to imagine for me being so desperate that you would set yourself on fire. Ah, part of me's thinking I shouldn't have spoken about this. I wonder whether I wonder whether you're gonna, I don't know, feel the same. Or it was just such a shocking, it was a shocking story, yes, but shocking things happen all the time. I think for me that it felt more personal because I felt at times that I was asking for help or and being ignored. And there's loads of times, especially early when I was in Spain, where I would phone somebody. Say, for example, I was looking for an apartment. I would phone somebody, and as soon as they heard my very bad Spanish or knew that I was English, they would put the phone down. And you'd think, I don't know. I think sometimes people think that if you're English, you've got all this privilege, which I have a lot of different privileges, but I'm still a foreigner, another, when I'm in another country. And as I say, there's loads of times where I remember I think I had to get some sort of social security card, and I waited in this queue, and I got to the front of the queue, and they said, "Oh no, you're in the wrong queue." It was just to get a piece of paper, and they said, "You're in the wrong queue. You need to go over there and then queue again just to get this form." And actually, the desk that was there, it was all kind of one long desk, and all the different people were there, and the forms was behind them. And I suppose I made a bit more of a fuss. And eventually she was like huffing and puffing and, oh, and then she just turned around and picked up the form and said, "You were in the wrong queue, but here's the form, go away, fill it in, and then queue again. And this is a third queue. You have to fill in the form and then go to this other queue." I'm thinking, seriously? Is there no compassion for the fact that I'm obviously a foreigner here and that all you had to do was turn around and get this form? I don't know. Do you think I'm being petty? Do you think it's being silly? I just, I don't look Spanish. I think that's one of the things. I don't look Spanish. I obviously don't sound Spanish as soon as I open my mouth. And you just think a little bit of compassion to understand you. And I know everybody has their hard lives and their different stories. I wasn't sure what the conclusion was going to be about this sort of man that I saw on the news. One thing is that I was shocked that obviously the cultural values that in England we're very protected, and I hadn't realised that. And obviously in Spain they did show things. I have a feeling things have changed though. This is 20 years ago, so it may well be that in the UK they show things a lot more. And when I lived in Kazakhstan, there was things that I saw that I was quite shocked about as well. So I think that that was one thing. But as I say, I think also it's this dehumanizing of people, and that I don't know the details of their story. I don't know the complete 100% truth of whether they were lied to or whether they went there willingly and now wanted money from the government. If you're going to be look on it as in the worst possible motives that they had. But I am wondering, well, what would make me do something like that? And just how desperate you would have to be to do something like that. I hope you don't feel like that ever. So what's the conclusion? Help me out here. What's the conclusion with this? I think I think it bothers me that when people are dehumanized, even if even if I understand some of the bias and some of the negative, but it bothers me that it's so easy to look at another person and think, well, they do that kind of thing because they're a bad person or they're this kind of person. But I would do it for these good reasons, for these important reasons. Yeah. Is it about being misunderstood? I kept thinking today, is it about being misunderstood, or is it about not being listened to, or is it about being ignored, or different things like that? Obviously, when you're speaking, and this is the whole point about the podcast. I wanted really to share stories about speaking, in that I think we have this expectation of what the world is like. And I think it's going to be useful to say, oh, well, I'm not sure the world is as perfect in terms of understanding everything. You think, oh, if I use the right words, I'll always be understood. It's like, no, no, some people misunderstand you deliberately, and some people are just having a bad day and they misunderstand you. But I thought if I was better at speaking, I would always be understood. And in a way that the world would be a nicer place, because there would be no reason for anybody to ignore me or be mean to me, because it was my fault that I hadn't said things the right way. And I thought, I think my expectations about the world are wrong. I think there needs to be an understanding that Sometimes you're misunderstood and sometimes you're ignored. Oh, I don't know whether you know that at the moment there's a big thing in the news in the UK about the post office. And for decades, I think it's 10 or is it definitely 10 years that people have been saying that they're innocent and that they haven't stolen from the post office. And the post office has been saying, yes, you have stolen from us. And there's this whole big news story, whatever going on. And you look at these people and they have like different witnesses and evidence and people in authority like MPs and newspapers at least for 10 years have been saying they're innocent, here's the evidence, here's the proof, and they can't make themselves be heard. And these, as I say, these are the newspapers, people have been reporting on it. And the reason it's hit the press now is there was a drama made about it, and that was played, I'm not sure if it was Christmas or early January. And because of this drama being made, everybody, there was 4 episodes, it was really good drama, but upsetting to watch. Because as I say, they just kept being ignored and blamed and being told that they were the problem. And you just think, oh my goodness, how can you live with that? And there are people that did actually commit suicide. So again, horrendous, tragic, horrible story. But now they're being listened to. It's like maybe my expectations about the world, if these people are being ignored, and some of them were authorities and lawyers and the media and different things were reporting on it. Obviously, I think that the individuals should have been listened to. But in my mind, part of me thought, I can understand how somebody like me can be ignored, but there are people that are kind of VIPs. They must be listened to, or they must be heard. It's like, no, no, no. Sometimes even they're ignored. And they persisted. They really persisted. And that's the answer, isn't it, really? That luckily they found each other. They were able to support each other. And they decided that this situation was so unfair and so important that they would keep going and keep talking about this until people listened. Fascinating. Fascinating. I know I'm a bit of a geek, but I think that's fascinating how the world works and how you can keep saying the same thing. You can use the right words. You can express yourself really well. And then something just clicks or the times change and then everybody's listening. I just think that's amazing. But I also think that it's useful for me to remember, sometimes you will be ignored and sometimes you will be misunderstood and sometimes dismissed and sometimes underestimated. But it doesn't mean that you're rubbish at speaking. It means that you're part of a system and part of a society that with other people that are equally human and can have good and bad days and sometimes they're just not in a position to listen. And then it's, what do you do next? And the main thing is, don't beat yourself up about it. Yeah, learn something new, but don't beat yourself up about it. This is, oh, let me just use the word cynicism. I don't want you to feel cynical and like the world is, ugh. I heard somebody say about cynicism is when you lose your naivety. And I thought, okay, I can understand that once you realize that the world doesn't work a particular way, then in a way you've broken that naivety. And then you can feel cynical. But feeling cynical, and I know for myself, feeling cynical, certainly about government or anything like that, doesn't feel very good. But he was saying, this is Jordan Peterson, he was saying cynicism is a step towards wisdom and that you need to have courage to keep moving forwards. I'm getting a bit serious now. I feel a bit self-conscious that I'm getting a bit serious, but I'm really interested in this. I've had days where I'm feeling very cynical and very negative about society and different things, and I don't think it serves me, but I didn't know which direction to go in. I didn't know what was next. And so for me to say, oh, it's courage to keep learning and keep interacting, and that moves you towards wisdom. I don't know. Wisdom feels like an odd word where I don't really know what it means, but I like the idea that it takes some courage and that you do need to move out of the cynicism. You're more educated. Once you're cynical, once you've lost the naivety, you are more educated. So it is progress, but don't stay there. Move forward and then have some courage and keep interacting and I don't know, a vision of the future that you want to see happen. And for me, that's about I'd like individuals to feel that they could better expressing themselves. And that's why I'm hitting record and putting out the podcast. Let me know whether any of these ideas resonate with you and you feel anything. And don't have nightmares about horrible stories. And take care. See you next week. Bye.